Is it not on? Okay, all right. Good morning, commissioners and staff. The Durham Planning Department is recommending that the Board of County Commissioners no longer be involved with annexation cases within the urban growth boundary. There were 3 statements made in a recent memo. Why would you even consider these 3 proposals relinquishing authority to review cases within the county? What voice would county residents have in annexation cases? Some people within the circled area in red up there live in the city, but many do not. We cannot elect the mayor or city council. You are the county residents' only elected voice. We depend on you to represent us. The urban growth boundary makes up about 70% of Durham County. Who do county citizens turn to when their property or wells are damaged from blasting in newly annexed city developments, sharing a property line with county residents? What if the new city development has caused flooding on neighboring county residents' property? I want us to look at 2 cases. So if you would click again, one more time. Okay, this is a adjacent piece of property. There was a new city annexation case right beside this property. It has left this widow, who is a widow, with a lot of property damage. Could county commissioners have lobbied for better buffers? If you give up the right to hear the cases, who do we turn to? And we know you can't annex them, but we need your voice. Next one, please. This is a recent case. Savannah Kilman reached out to me because a neighboring annexation case was flooding her home with stormwater runoff. Mr. Maurice Jones responded to recent emails we sent in and is helping Lana coordinate with city stormwater engineers to find a solution. Without our county representation, Ms. Kilman would have little hope. This problem still is not fixed with her property flooding again this weekend. Every piece of property inside the urban growth boundary will not be annexed into the city. Most residents in the county that live within the UGB do not want to be annexed into the city. These county residents deserve to be represented. Their elected officials deserve to be represented by their elected officials when the annexation cases arise in close proximity to their homes. Removing the county commissioners' voices from these annexation cases will remove county residents' representation. We need more representation, not less. The county residents expect for you to be our voice. We need you. And in the 3 bullet points that were represented, it said the pending consolidated annexation cases reported to JCCPC will be discontinued as 1. 2, the planning staff will no longer send it to you all. And 3, only if it's outside the UGB will you hear it. We need you to hear any property that's county. You are our only voice. Thank you.
Monica, you could leave that up there because it would be very helpful if you don't mind. Thank you. Hi, I'm Wanda Allen, and I come today wishing to learn how you can choose not to represent the cities that voted, the citizens that vote for you. Who's going to represent us if it's not you? It has been documented and put on record that damage that occurs to the county residents due to city annexation is not a city problem. It's a county problem, per the city mayor. You guys are very familiar with the 35 people on Junction Road that are sharing one well that is polluted. Have you forgotten the number of hours that you spent and the dollars you tried to bring resolution to the problem? Which still, as of today, has not been resolved. But you, as county commissioners, have been identified as the ones that's supposed to handle the problem. The urban growth boundary makes up about 70% of the county. So why are you willing not to be involved in the decision process? Why would you be willing to accept the responsibility without being part of the process? If you guys do not represent us, who's going to? We need you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Heidi Grable. I live in northern Durham County in Rougemont, right in also Bahama. This was brought to my attention, and I don't even know who I'm supposed to be talking to except the county commissioners, just to say this notice by the planning department, as I understand it, the planning department is asking the commissioners to not be involved in these decisions for the annexations. Why would the Durham Planning Department have the request to reduce input by citizens and our county commissioners, elected officials, that are representing our citizens? Why would this be accepted by our county commissioners? This sounds and feels and looks unconstitutional to me. I know that the county commissioners had their power reduced by some state legislation that passed. I still don't understand why we don't have an equal vote with the city council. I am a real estate agent. When I go to the Orange County Planning Department to make a request for a client who wants to use a different zoning or different type of permit for something, the Orange County Planning Department person said to me, "We do what our taxpayers tell us they want." And I was literally shocked, because I was like, that was so refreshing to think that the planning department would respond to someone that way. I don't ever get that feeling when I talk to the Durham Planning Department. They're always pushing just higher development, higher this, yes, yes, yes. It doesn't feel like it's moving that way. Why would it serve the citizens to remove their representation and voice in annexations and developments, both inside and outside the urban growth boundary? What is next? Why would this serve the Durham County residents, and who is the planning department serving with this request? Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have two virtual comments from Paige Polk first. Give us one moment while the clerk pulls you up. Hi, Paige, we can see you now. You're cutting in and out. If you can come off of mute, but I think your signal is weak. We can't hear you. Paige, while you try to sort that out, we're going to go to, yeah? Oh, she put a message in the chat. Oh,
Because it's
no,
a
the chat
public
is
meeting, we
disabled.
can't do chat. She can call in.
Yeah, are you able to call in? Okay. Thank you. While you do that, we will switch to Tina Motley. Yeah, Monica.
The phone number is also in the message in the news release that has the link for the meeting.
Then, Monica, do you want to go to Tina while we wait? Oh, yes. Paige, our clerk Wallace is going to send you an email with the phone number to dial in. Tina Motley or Mohi? Motley? Okay. 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 Well, then that would conclude, well, we'll wait, we'll give it a minute for Paige to rejoin. And when we get to consent agenda, I'm going to do it auctioneer style again. Just read the agenda item numbers and run through them. And if there are any that the commissioners have questions on, like, just turn on your mic and say something so that I can hear you. You're already ready?
While we're waiting, I did just want to take some time. I hope everyone did have a really joyous Labor Day. Also, thank you for everyone who did come and do public comment. And last but not least, I'd like to publicly congratulate the North Carolina Central University Eagles on winning the Orange Blossom Classic this weekend. So I have my voice back somewhat from Miami, but I thought at least that's my comment, my public comment for the day. So if you see an Eagle or see anybody on that football team or the coach, by all means, please bid them congratulations, salute on a good season ahead. Because, yay, thank you.
Chair Alama, if you want to go ahead and go through consent, by that time she should be.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we will move to consent agenda. 0328, 0452, 0453, 0456. Oh, okay.
At least read the title of what it is. Usually we don't just do the number.
We did that last time because of really, really long names.
I think we did it because it was not our work session, it was on a regular session meeting.
I just was saying, because I didn't
Yeah,
log in fast enough to say I have a question about one.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Okay, Commissioner Carter?
Yes, thank you. I had a question about 0452, the approval of the 500 East Main Street Affordable Housing Development documents. Just one question related to the length of the change from a 20-year mortgage to a 40-year mortgage. I think I've got that right. I have lost my notes on this, but I just wondered if there were any potential drawbacks to that change.
Good morning, Commissioner. That's a great question. There aren't any negative impacts associated with that. This is simply to align with HUD's requirement. We're receiving HUD funding on this one. This is a HUD loan, and they have a 40-year term, and our loan must align with their 40-year term. And so this is just to true all of that up. The majority of the information in these agreements is just to kind of clean up some legalese associated with the various agreements, but that's simply what this is.
We have no concerns about
No,
it?
ma'am.
Okay.
No, we've reviewed it with finance, legal, and others. Everybody's comfortable with it, and so we're good.
Thank you, Perry.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And I just have a follow-up. In full disclosure, I am not prepared for this meeting. My daughter got married this weekend. This is my first meeting in 12 years that I am not prepared for. And Perry is also the original legal documents that had, I think it was after 50 years. If the owner did not want to continue maintaining the properties as affordable, that the county would have right of first refusal. Is that still being maintained here?
That is correct, Commissioner Jacobs. The actual agreement basically states that at year 36, we began our check-in.
Okay.
And at year 40, we make the
Okay.
decision as to whether we want to proceed with the agreement with the affordable housing developer or if the county wants to take it back over. So,
Okay,
yes, ma'am.
great. Thank you.
And we're gonna,
Could I just, and also on the very first item, it's the approval of this budget ordinance amendment to recognize this great grant we're receiving, and it's sort of in partnership with other counties and also Central Carolina Pines Regional Council. Anyway, I just wanted to lift up the work that our great staff is doing with this. I see you all sitting in the back. Woo! I think this is such important work, and I'm so thrilled at, our Energy and Sustainability Department, the work that they are doing, and just wanted to lift up, how grateful I am that we're taking this issue seriously and doing this great work. Thank you.
And Commissioners, I would like to make one comment. At the next meeting, our regular term meeting, we will have a ceremonial item and a big check that will be presented.
That's right.
And so we will give this item the proper time that's needed. We're very excited.
and Paige is ready now, so we're gonna return to citizen comments to hear her comments.
Paige, if you can unmute yourself.
Is our system's volume up?
Paige, are you able to hear us?
Okay, I got a text message. There are other people in the public that can hear her. It might be us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm actually going through all of the microphones.
So I think,
Yeah.
is there like our system's volume all the way up?
It is, yes, ma'am.
Let me try.
Well, if I'm good to go, I can.
Oh, she can hear you.
Okay,
There we
great,
go.
perfect. Thank you, everyone, for the staying the course with the technical difficulties. My name is Paige Polk, and I live off of Doc Nichols Road in Southeast Durham. During the May 6th, 2024 Board of County Commissioners work session, the topic of county input on annexations was raised with a question to explore changing the previously established process. And I'm speaking today to share how essential it is that county residents be allowed to give case-related comments during informational presentations for these annexation requests and not just during public comment. I am purposefully attending this meeting on Zoom. Unfortunately, with the technical difficulties, you can't see it, but I was hoping that you could see for yourselves the effects of poor county representation in city development projects. I am a Durham County resident, but when you look around the entire perimeter of my property border, you see rows of city development properties, polluted creeks, massive deforestation, and mounds of red clay. I have been living in a constant construction zone for at least 4 years, with high traffic, beeping, and even dynamite blasting for industrial city housing projects. It's disrupted my sleep and damaged my home. This development has also destabilized the wildlife ecosystem, polluting creeks and scattering deer, groundhogs, coyotes, and more throughout the neighborhood to look for shelter. And I wasn't able to vote for or against any of this because Durham County residents cannot vote for the Durham City Council nor for the Durham mayor. County commissioners must allow county residents to provide comments on annexation cases during informational presentations and after the case is sent to the Planning Commission. These comments must also be consolidated in a prioritized item for City Hall, especially because of the previously mentioned representation deficit. We must uplift the voices of the people who have tended to and lived in our communities for years. There can be responsible development that offers affordable housing, protects our water from pollution, and integrates thoughtful community spaces like parks and small businesses into our planning. To do this, we need the voices of those who've invested their lives here, not just their finances, to decide how it's built. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. Thank you, everyone who came for our public comments. That concludes the citizens' comments period. There is going to be a presentation today regarding the comments that were made, so please stick around for that. I believe it's going to be around the lunch hour. That's the goal, to have it. So we hope you'll stick around for that. And now, returning to the consent agenda, I will pass it to our County Manager.
Okay. Item number 240453. This is on page 4, Budget Ordinance Amendment number 2513, recognizing $246,000 in grant funding from the Institute of Intergovernmental Research through the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Program for the initiative to build bridges to increase access to opioid use disorder treatment options in the nation's jails project for the Durham County Sheriff's Office.
I just have a question. Is this just continuing the original grant? It's just, or is it going to enable anything new, or is it just the continuation of the funding we've been getting?
I'll have someone from the Sheriff's Office respond.
You can come up to the mic.
Yeah.
Good morning, commissioners and staff. Actually, this is going to be providing some services that we're implementing as far as housing. We want to provide at least 90 days worth of temporary housing for recovery home and transitional housing. Also, for our media department, we want to put some televisions and flyers around the jail so that other the detainees will be able to know that our program is there. We also want to contract and hire a certified drug and alcohol counselor for our weekends and the holiday period when myself or my staff is not there. We also, some of the grant funding will be for supplies and also to travel to different conferences and seminars to allow us to explore different treatment options.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. With the transition housing, will you be working with some of the partners in the community who are providing that type of housing?
Yes, we've actually partnered with Freedom House, we're having conversations with Oxford House, and a new organization that to us, Straight Talk Transitional Housing.
I don't know if you all are have a representative on the Durham Joins Together Mental Health and Treatment committee because they've done all this work on housing. They have a whole housing, they've been doing outreach to housing providers, and so Rod is shaking his head. So
They do attend, Commissioner.
okay, fantastic. Yeah. So yeah, they've been doing a lot. So you've got something to build on there.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
And let me just give my name, Tammy Vaughn, and I'm the SMART Program Supervisor. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you for bringing in additional dollars so that we can help our folks.
Okay, the next item is 240456. This is an approval of a capital project amendment appropriating $307,428 in ARPA funding and $115,000 of budgeted debt service funding to the PAYGO Fund to support the new JSD Transition House Renovation Capital Project with a total project budget of $422,428.
So would you have staff talk about that? We're always in such need of housing. So would you share for the public a little bit more information about that, please?
Sure. Perry?
Oh, good morning, Commissioners. This project is the renovation of the existing transition house. To be candid, staff is still trying to determine whether or not it makes sense to repurpose the facility or purchase a new facility for this purpose. As you know, the transition house is basically ran by the Justice Services Department, and what they do is they house citizens that have recently been, I guess, released from incarceration to help them sort of get back acclimated to the community, and so they really do a good service. And right now, this house is just for men. There are some conversations around what else we may do in this space, but right now we really need to get the design team on board so they can help us with, I guess, further evaluation of new properties for consideration of starting over or repurposing this site. So the other thing that is important about this is that, as mentioned here, we are using ARPA funding to support a portion of the design contract, and it has a deadline of December 2024, December 31st, 2024, for us to get those funds encumbered. And so that's really what we're after, is try to make best use of those funds while they're available. So,
Commissioner Jacobs, you had one.
Yeah, I guess I was a little concerned about this because I think the last conversation we had was the price tag for renovating it, according to our very high standards. It just didn't seem to make sense to me. And thinking about what we could do with that, amount of money that was discussed before. And so I guess I don't know. I don't know if there's a way that this, even if, I'm trying to understand why we're going to spend this much money on, moving forward with this house.
We have not made that decision yet, Commissioner.
Okay.
Again, the design team they are evaluating this house, but we also need to get them on board to help us evaluate other properties that may be for sale and are available. And so we'll come back to you at some point with, I guess, more information to help us all make an informed decision about which way we go. But yes, we heard you loud and clear, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're evaluating whether it makes sense to repurpose this property or to start over.
And this much money is needed just to make an assessment?
This is not only an assessment, it's a lot of other things. Yes, some of the money, it does cost a little money to get the design team to help us evaluate other properties, but we're also doing some evaluations around what we can actually accomplish on this site. One of the other things we may consider is we may consider demolishing the property entirely and starting over on the property that we own. There are some regulatory approvals that are associated with this site as well as others that we have to consider. So there's a lot sort of bundled up in this. Clearly, we will not utilize all of this funding until we have finalized which direction we're going. But this is just to keep us moving, so, and in the spirit of trying to take advantage of those ARPA funds. So,
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mhm.
(240490), approval of budget ordinance amendment number 25 BCC 17 for the Department of Social Services to recognize Duke Energy Carolinas rate setting fund settlement of $22,000. 240510, approval to enter into a contract with Inventrol LLC in the amount of $51,445 for ED current testing at various county facilities. Funding is available in the current operating budget. The next one is 240519, approval to amend a contract with Capital Marketing Solutions LLC, doing business as Alpha Graphics of downtown Raleigh for ballot printing services in the amount of $60,000 for a new total of $182,315. And I would like to pause to recognize our rock star team that has done incredible work to get our new Board of Elections facilities up to par. Right. This will be my third time for a general election and for the presidential election, and each time for the past 3 cycles, we've gone through some type of renovation, but this one was monumental. Right. I have, from afar, been sending up prayers, but the team, Derek's team, our firm, the firm that has helped us facilitated Salmon, and then our Rockstar Engineering and also our information technology team. Thank you so much. So didn't mean to do that impromptu acknowledgement as well, but I wanted to say thank you for all of your efforts.
But no, it did need to be said. I did see the statement, and I know that our elections director did share that there was some potential for name changes on our state because there were some lawsuits going on. And so I was wondering if the $60,000 in the change had anything to do with that, because we had to keep some names. We had to change from Biden to Kamala. They had to keep Kennedy's name. So I don't know if any of that had anything to do with the uptick, and if so, I don't see them here. But I also wanted to, while asking that question, pile on my congratulations, but also shout them out. Y'all know yesterday was the closing deadline for Kids Vote for the stickers. So now we got stickers coming out. Just last week, we launched an app so you would know, where's your polling place, how to get your poll, how long the lines are. Like, we've had it online. It's been award-winning. Now we got it where it's available on the phone. And also, that same department was highlighted on CNN for the security precautions that they've taken. Like, holistically, Board of Elections is killing it. Like, we will be ready in November. And I feel good about that. I feel good about we voted for us, and I feel good that we have, really creative people. I know they also did an infomercial. But do you think, that any of these charges, that it has to do with some of the ballot changes?
Well, it was a combination of ballot changes as well as standard contractual needs at this time.
Okay. And we bought new computers for the hearing impaired. I forgot about that. We bought those. So just for the public, I know a lot of people are worried about the election. We are posturing ourselves to be prepared. But that's all.
All right, the next one is also related to the election. It's item number 0520, approval to amend a contract with South Data Inc. for printing and mailing services in the amount of $101,089 for a new total of $140,089.35. The next one is 0521, Public Health to create a grant-funded community health worker, 1.0 FTE position using previously recognized firm for the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services Division of Public Health Women, Infant, and Community Wellness section. The next one is 240522, Budget Ordinance Amendment Number 19, Public Health to recognize $140,350 from the North Carolina Department of Health Human Services Division of Public Health Epidemiology section of the Communicable Disease Branch for COVID-19. The next one is number 523, Budget Ordinance Amendment 19 to recognize $72,204 from the North Carolina Department of Health Human Services Division of Public Health Epidemiology section of Communicable Disease section branch.
And I know Commissioner Lum has asked for this before, and you've given it to us, Rod. She's Dr. Jenkins. We called you Dr. Jenkins early on. Now we, can really, if there is any way, I know some of this is not competitive, but it seems consistently, if not quarterly, we're getting funds, and some of it is competitive. And Joanne from DHHS for infant and women, and then we get them for epidemiology. Could we just get a catch-all like we're in a new fiscal year? I think it'd be really good to kind of track and say, in this quarter we've picked up X amount of $1 million to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And I know you did that for us last year, but if we could get it again, I need it today.
More than happy to do it. Just need to get some analytics together, but happy to present this through the Chief of Staff.
Thank you. That was all my, thank y'all. Go ahead, Clark.
All right, the next one is number 527, approval to enter a contract with NWN in the amount of $264,352.12 to renew support for Varonis Cloud and Security Analytics licenses. The next one is 240528, approval of Budget Ordinance Amendment 22 for the Department of Social Services to recognize Duke Energy Progress Energy Share the Light funds of $24,367.63. The next one is 240536, approval of contract amendment for Stormwater Operations Specialist LLC for sewer easement maintenance services in the amount of $60,000, bringing the total to $172,750 and not to exceed $197,000. The next one is 240538, approval of fiscal year 2025 Durham Annual Transit Work Program Revenue Amendment. The next one is 240539, Capital Project Amendment 25 CPA 0009, appropriating $3.5 million in 2022 general obligation bond funding for Durham Technical Community College campus adjacent land purchases of $3.2 million and a Durham Technical Community College campus police offices renovation. And the next one is 240540. This is a capital project amendment, and what's happening, we are reducing one, and we're increasing the other. So we reduced the first one, which was approved, and we're reappropriating those dollars into another project, which will be used for new utility lines burial project, which is also a part of the master plan for Durham Technical Community College. The next one is 240541, approval of Federal Aviation Administration grant offer in the amount of $35,478,766 on behalf of the Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority. And as you know, these are pass-through dollars. Or not pass-through, we just have to have the item on our agenda. The next one is 240546, approve conveyance of controlled access right-of-way and utility easements to the North Carolina Department of
Manager, we got, you skipped one. We got to do 20.
I skipped one. I was in a rhythm.
It was the last line.
And I should have known. I'm more sure she put her hand up.
Look, it's 240452.
Okay, I'm
it was
sorry.
The final. It's okay.
I'm sorry. It was
That's
going
why
way
we're
too
here.
fast. All
We're
right.
working together.
All right. 240542, that's capital budget amendment. Number 11, transferring $900,000 of budgeted debt service fund to pay-go fund to support the new Durham Technical Community College roof replacement project, okay? Now, the next one is 240546, approve conveyance of controlled access right-of-way and utility easements to North Carolina DOT at 15501 and Garrett Road. Okay, question. Go for it.
Thank you. I just want to get some additional reassurance that we feel very comfortable and confident that the conveyance of these easements really is not going to have any negative impact on the open space plan and the conservation value of the land. I know it says that they're not going to, but I want verification in person from Ms. Burns.
Good morning. I'm Celeste Burns, Open Space and Real Estate Manager. So yes, we have kind of been following this with Nancy as it's been going along and have kind of cross-checked it with our New Hope Creek Corridor Open Space Plan, how that impacts. It's really just a little bit of a narrow area for this pretty major kind of service road and thing that they're doing at Garrett Road, but it does not impact the county's land on the south. Or the kind of corridor area that we're kind of keeping track of. So yes, we have been following that and have been working with Ellen Beckman with transportation and her having some more opportunities to comment on some of these transportation projects.
Great.
I know, it's been great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Glad I asked.
The next item is 240548, acceptance of Federal Aviation Administration grant offer in an amount of $10 million on behalf of the Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority. The next one is 240551, approval to amend the previously approved service contract with psychiatric services in consultation to correct the amount of $154,053.90 to provide mental health services in the Durham County Detention Center. The next one is 552, to approve 2 farmland conservation easement projects, Ken and Janine Wolf, for 30 acres at 1444 Bacon Road, Rougemont, and Clifford and Raylene Teasley for 17 acres at 6815 Wiley Magnum Road, Bahama. Exciting. The next one is 558, Budget Ordinance Amendment Number 20 to recognize $100,000 from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services Division of Public Health Local Community Support Section to support the 10 essential public health services. The next one is 240559, Budget Amendment Number 21, to recognize $10,000 from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Public Health, Women, Infant, and the Community Wellness Section and Maternal Health Branch to purchase medical supplies to manage hypertension and diabetes during pregnancy.
And I would imagine these are like our blood pressure cuffs. Okay, yay. So, and we'll be giving those out because, correct me if I'm wrong, Joanne, Medicaid is now doing an extended period where they, Rod, I'm looking at you. We're doing an extended period where they will cover mothers postpartum, and so we're in a position, okay, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, I'm done. And those are blood pressure cuffs. Are there any other items that could be purchased with those dollars, or just the blood pressure cuffs? I thought so. No. Okay, thank you. Good work.
The next item is 0564, approve Thermola Restaurant Lease Amendment to extend rent commencement to May 1st, 2025. Yes, Commissioner Jacobs.
We are going to have a really big party when this restaurant opens.
We are. It's been a long time.
I am showing up. I will not be in the seat, but I will be there. Like, I just want y'all to know.
And I know Perry and everyone who's been working on it will be the people who are celebrating the most. I just had a question. I mean, yes, this restaurant is going to open. But I'm wondering, are the investments that we are making, and I know we've never been in the restaurant business before, you know, are these investments that will be applicable to any restaurateur who may come into the building?
Yes, they certainly will be. And that's the challenge that this particular tenant has been running up against, is because they're the first tenant in this space. Everything is brand new. I do want to point out that, by the way, I'm Nancy Mitchell. I'm the Senior Real Estate Officer. This particular agenda item does not include any additional funding from the county in order to get the restaurant open. We're just giving them a little bit more grace because their costs have been considerably higher, again, based on not knowing exactly what the building could accommodate and what needed to be done. Any subsequent tenant that comes into the space will benefit from the work that this tenant is doing, for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And I see that Claudia might have one, but I did want to throw out, I remember when I worked at the AG's office, there was this beautiful lunchroom across the hall, and they turned it into a conference room. And I remember there was an elderly lady. She says, you can tell they really don't care about us. I was like, why? She says, because they don't want us to have a full hour for a lunch break, because now we got to leave and come back. So please know that this is a labor of love, and we want to extend foot traffic. I know the subway isn't here anymore. Perry has talked about how we've tried to work with folks on getting a contract and coming back, and with restaurants closing all over the country. Please know that this is not just because we want to open up a restaurant to say we did it. We want people to know that we care about you having to get in your car, drive 20 minutes, eat for 20 minutes, and then come 20 minutes back, and now your lunch break has been taken away from you. So just know it's a labor of love, and we're trying.
All right, the next item is 240570, Budget Ordinance Amendment 25, Cooperative Extension to recognize a $50,000 grant award from Positive Childhood Alliance, North Carolina, to support Cooperative Extension's Welcome Baby Resource Program. The next item is 0571. It's an approval of a capital project amendment, number 12, and budget ordinance amendment 23, appropriating $626,372.32 of debt service funds and transferring the funding to PAYGO fund to cover the sales tax associated with the multi-department radio and tower capital project for the countywide replacement of $580,524.32. Durham Public Schools radio replacement, and that amount will be to $23,837. And the Durham Technical Community College radio replacement, and that amount will total $22,011. A lot of numbers there. As you may recall, we approved this project at the last meeting. This is the associated sales tax dollars that are needed for the project. The next one is a technical amendment, and we will be rescinding the board action item that was approved on last meeting, 240183, and we were replacing that with this one, the approval of capital amendment CPA 13 and budget amendment ordinance 25 BCC 024, appropriating $200,000 of budgeted debt service fund balance and transferring the funding to the PAYGO fund for the project bill renovation at the shops of Hope Valley, as well as authorizing the county manager to execute a contract for architectural design services with R&D Architects for the project bill renovation at shops of Hope Valley. The next one Okay, the next one is 250574. This one is a technical amendment as well. This is rescind the board-approved agenda item 240179 from August 26, 2024, and approve capital project amendment 14 and budget amendment 25, appropriating $350,000 of debt service fund balance, transferring those dollars of debt service to the PAYGO fund, and appropriating the funds to support the Durham County Sheriff's Training Facility Capital Project for pre-construction activities, as well as executing the contract for pre-construction services in the amount of $202,003 with C.T. Wilson Construction and Rankin 3 Grading for the Durham County Sheriff's Training Facility Project. And those are our items.
Thank you so much, Madam Interim Manager. That concludes our consent agenda. If you all had noticed, there was supposed to be a presentation from Equitable Wellbeing, but due to some time constraints, you're going to tell me, we are going to be moving up 24055, the broadband infrastructure funds update. And I would like, I think the resource individuals are our very own Claudia Hager, Greg Morrow, and we do have Mr. Jeffrey Brooks from the NCDIT Broadband Infrastructure Office. If you all would come up. I imagine there is a PowerPoint. Yes, sir, this is the hot seat. You can sit in the middle. Do you have a presentation, correct? She has it queued up. Thank you so much, everybody else, for being conciliatory as we move some things around. How are you today, sir?
Good. How are you?
Cannot complain.
So, good morning, commissioners. Hi, Claudia.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Yes. I'm going to tee you up. That's all right.
Okay.
All right.
I just wanted to say we have been honored to have Mr. Jeffrey Brooks with us. He's been walking with us on this journey with broadband for some time, and as a partner across the state, he's visited every county just about, I'm sure, and has 2 other commitments, and will visit 2 counties this afternoon. As the board knows, we started on the journey trying to do broadband before all of this infrastructure dollars happened. And we could not move very far. So we all were so grateful that the federal government as well as the state infused the dollars. But most grateful that the state has taken on the effort of facilitating all of this work. It is a huge undertaking. And because of economies of scale, they are saving counties lots of time administratively. And I will stop right there. So, Mr. Brooks, I just wanted to welcome you and thank you for joining us. And the show is all yours.
Thank you.
And Mr. Brooks, before you do start, I do recognize that when our chair is back, I do recognize that you've given, we had 45 minutes, but she did point out you had 2 other presentations. If you would like, we could hold our questions to the end. That way you might be able to finish your presentation so you could make your others if that's what you would like.
And he also shared before, you said you wouldn't need the full 45 minutes.
Okay.
I try and be efficient, so so I appreciate it. Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is my 91st county that I have been at in person. So it's nice to be here. This is my 46th board presentation. Unique boards. There's some boards where I've gone back to, and so I'm happy to be here. I don't read slides. Please ask your questions in deference to what you said. Please ask anything you want. It's odd to be sitting down.
Is it?
Yes. I mean, it's fine, but it's just weird. This is the first time I've ever sat down. So anyway, I think I hit.
Yeah, you hit to the left.
Great. So I'm trying to think how to phrase this, but let me just kind of put it here. This is an overview of what our team does, and I'm there at the top blue box, the availability, and then the bottom shows the broadband office money that is going into broadband, and obviously you can see a significant jump in 2022 to 2024 thanks to ARPA funding. This is what my team does. And I've worked with counties in the broadband area really for the past 8 years. Before I came to work for the state 846 days ago, I still know how many days. I've never worked for the government before. I work with counties up and down the East Coast. I've won state grants for clients in 14 states. I've won federal grants, both Regional Digital Opportunity Fund and Reconnect grants. And I've won statewide grants in New York and New Jersey. I came here a couple of years ago because a girl that I work with came over to the broadband office, and she said, come over here. And we talked for a while. I didn't know the pay cut was going to be that big, but here I am. So this is what I do. And I think this slide kind of outlines our engagement across the state. I see the county manager as being my primary client. I say this, and Claudia heard this, what you guys deal with as a board, what your county teams deal with is water and sewer. And we've heard it this morning, public safety, public health, library, landfill. You try and manage the Board of Education. These are things that I, as a citizen, appreciate because they're more complex than most people realize. We are subject matter experts in broadband. So it's my job, when you draw your organization chart, to put my name up there in a little box and my little team and say, hey, we're on your org chart. Maybe a dotted line, but we're here to support you in all things broadband. If you're already experts, you already have the expertise, that's great. There are many cases where there were not programs that would benefit the county. When I was hired, I was given 3 blank sheets of paper and said, develop a continuing access to broadband program, develop a broadband pole replacement program, develop a stopgap program. Gave me a lot of money. So in my car, that's in the parking deck, there are 3 gym bags with money. One's got $90 million, one has $100 million, one has $400 million. It doesn't do the citizens in this county any good for that money to be in those gym bags in my car. I need to empty those dollars out and get them to work in Durham County. So that's what I'm here for. We also, as you can see in that little orange thing up there, we talk directly to citizens, whether it's in a citizens forum, whether it's in settings like this. But we generally handle 60 to 70 inquiries a month from citizens across this state. They may come from you, they may come from the governor's office, the legislature, from congressional offices, directly from citizens. 3 out of 4 times it's, why don't I have broadband? It can be, I see these big thick cables, why don't I have broadband? About 25% of the time it's, I can't afford it. I don't know how to use it, because availability of infrastructure is irrelevant without people being able to afford it, pay for it, and understand how to utilize it. So in the former, I would say probably 1 out of 5 times we can actually get people added into an existing project or into a network. But if we can't do that, we will advise them, say, well, these are how our programs work, and this is what to expect. We call citizens back within 24 to 48 hours of them contacting us. We also email them, and when we email them back, we carbon copy the county manager, and we say, by the way, we won't let you know Dr. Soul is actively involved in working to expand broadband in your county. She works with your elected leadership to ensure as much broadband funding that's available can come into the county, because broadband is local. When I won a statewide project in New York, we at my little company, they were headquartered up in New York. I didn't have to go there, thank goodness, because they don't have barbecue up there. But in order to work with counties, but we'd work with about 20 counties in New York. So after we won the statewide project, somebody from the Department of Public Service called and said, well, Mr. Brooks, I understand that you're talking to counties. Yes, ma'am, we are. Well, you know, this is a statewide project. Counties aren't involved. So when I came here, the first thing I did was literally get in the car and start seeing county managers, talking about what we were doing and soliciting input, because I thought counties should have a seat at the table when we were looking at broadband projects. Reconnect, RDOF, and even our great grant programs are prescribed programs. They're scored. Counties might, on a good day, be notified, hey, guess what? There's a great grant project coming to your county. The FCC is releasing RDOF funds into your county. But I think these programs work better when you're able to tell us these are the issues in the county, and help us understand how best to help you. There's some things we don't have control over, but the fact that you're sitting at the table, which is how it works with the CAB program, I think advances what we're trying to do. Fundamentally, however, this is my job. Forget all the development, forget, all the regulatory and stuff like that. My job is to serve your citizens. I don't care if they're red, white, green, black, pink, blue. I don't care if they're male or female. I don't care if they're rich or poor. It's irrelevant to me. My job is to serve them. The way I serve them is through serving you and your county management. That's what I do. I could actually stop there and be done and take questions, but I got some more pretty pictures, so I'll share those with you. So we have a great GIS team, and as you can see in this busy slide, they map locations across the state to find out these locations that are eligible for support through our broadband subsidy programs. So there are two criteria. One is underserved, and the other is unserved. And we get into megabits, schmegabits, all that kind of stuff. The FCC, Federal Communications Commission, sets those standards. We simply adhere to them, and all they're talking about is, technically it's called throughput. I call it speed. How fast can you get data where you are, and how fast can you send data? Those standards constantly evolve, and you can see that is expressed up here. Let me back up just a second. This may come up, and again, I don't read slides, so it may be in a subsequent slide, but let me get this out before I forget about it. Not too long ago, those definitions were determined by census block. And what would happen is, from a definitional perspective, if a single address in that census block was considered to be served, the entire block, all addresses in that block were served. Well, obviously, that was not true. I can remember when I was on the other side of the house, I won some of the first great grants for Roanoke Electric Membership Cooperative, one of my clients at the time. And there were 2 or 3 addresses in one census block that were served. There were over 500 addresses that were unserved. We protested it. We won the grant. That began to be modified with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Reconnect program. And they said, we'll break census blocks down to smaller, more digestible groupings. And if up to 10% of the addresses in that smaller grouping, called a polygon, are served, the remaining addresses are still eligible for funding. The North Carolina Broadband Infrastructure Office, the GIS team, said, well, you know what? We really need to look at individual addresses. And we sort of drug the Federal Communications Commission along with us, and now we're actually focused on individual addresses on a county by county basis to determine if they're served or unserved. And this map, if you blowed it up, as they say, would probably devolve down into individual addresses. I'll show you that in just a second. Any questions so far? Are you bored?
Mike.
It just looks like a lot of, unserved or underserved locations. I didn't think it was this dire. This looks worse than I was expecting. And
yes, ma'am.
And you would say, I'm right.
I would say that compared to the goal of 100% universal coverage, yes, ma'am. Because the more locations we serve, the more disparate the unserved locations are, and the harder and more expensive it is to get to those locations. If you think about building fiber infrastructure, if you're in the air, it's going to be somewhere between $40,000 to $80,000 a mile to build that infrastructure. And that speaks to the fact that you're going to do what's called make ready, which means you assess the poles to make sure the poles can carry the weight of the fiber. Generally, if they're in the air, you're replacing a pole every 1 to 2 miles, or 1 to 2 poles per mile, out of the 18 to 28 poles that may be in existence per mile. You're talking about the electronics necessary to provide, electrical support for the fibers to push it on down the line. I mean, there's a lot that's involved. Whenever you get further out, the adage used to be that you would need about 6 to 8 addresses per mile to make it cash flow break even for a provider. We're now getting to where it's 2 or 3 addresses per mile is what's available. So it is more difficult, it is more expensive, and that does make it appear to be more dire, to reuse your words. That's a fair assessment. And I'll kind of add on, given the fact that we want every citizen in this county and this state to have access. And who gets left behind? Our goal is that nobody gets left behind. This slide, yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was blown away by that map, too. Could we go back to it for a second?
Yes, ma'am. Although I have Durham County maps shortly, but
Okay. I mean, I just find it fascinating to see also where you see a lot of white, and seeing the coastal areas and then some of the mountain counties. And I'm just wondering, on the flip side, why is their access so good?
Brunswick County, for example, Brunswick EMC, Electric Membership Cooperative, undertook a significant development project a number of years ago and made a plan to dramatically build out fiber access in that county. Some of that has used subsidy funds, but most of it was done on their own. In different places like Blue Ridge EMC up in the western part of the state, French Broad EMC, Roanoke EMC, all those co-ops have invested heavily in fiber access.
Let me just say, I'm also a Brunswick County property owner, and I am a huge fan of these types of energy companies that are focused on. They are incredible. And so to hear that, I mean, I get my power there from Brunswick Electric, and they are so community focused, and to know that they have done that, that's incredible. And I just think also, you know, what you just said, how people being left behind. I mean, in today's world, I mean, this is like having running water. I mean, if people do not have access, it's work, it's healthcare, it's social connectivity. I mean, you name it. It's essential. It's education. So this is a very serious issue. Thank you.
I'll give you a wonderful example. Well, it's not wonderful, but I think it's a reasonable example because I agree with your assessment. But in Enfield, North Carolina, which is in the northeastern part of North Carolina, probably one of the most impoverished communities in this state. I mean, I say poor because I grew up $80 a month child support and $120 a month in food stamps and free lunches. So I was poor, but I think they're fancy words with multiple syllables, but there's a lot of poor people in this town. They also have the highest rate of diabetic amputations in North Carolina per capita. And so when I think about broadband, I think about the fact I'm diabetic, and I have a little sensor, I think it's here, it's on one of these arms, and it talks to my phone. And granted, I can do it over cellular, but if I'm aware that there is, like in my home, I have broadband, if my number goes up, it starts beeping, and if it goes too high, it pings the endocrinologist. It comes back, does this thing, what are you doing, Jeff? Well, in Enfield, North Carolina, I'm wondering if people that live in that town making, let's say they're making the big wage of $15 an hour, they don't get paid time off to go to the doctor. They don't have exposure access to this, and my question simplistically is, what's an individual's leg worth? I mean, that's when I think about what broadband means. That's just, you know, I go to a lot of these board meetings, people say, well, it's education this, and it's this, and that, and this, and that. And that just is, no, it's about the single individual that lives in this county, in Durham County. They may live in a single wide in the north part of the county. They may live in a double wide over here. Wherever they may live, I just think that as a taxpayer, they have the right to utilize my tax money to make sure they have access to the things that everybody else has. That's just my 2 cents worth. Sorry, I editorialized. I don't think I'm allowed to do that as a government employee. I don't know, but anyway, be that as it may. This talks about all the money we have. We have a boatload of money, which is good. You see completing access to broadband, stopgap broadband pole replacement. That's all the money's in the trunk of my car. The frustration with completing access to broadband is that
he said it 3 times at this point. He knows what he's doing. Go ahead, sir.
So the point being is that with the CAB program, the legislature established certain stipulations for counties, And their thought was, from what I've heard offline, because I'm not a lobbyist, so I'm not supposed to talk to legislators officially, but they said, you know what, we got a lot of money, we put it into broadband. At the time that we put it into broadband, counties also got a lot of money. So if broadband's that important to a county, put your money where your mouth is and fund broadband. Our programs ran behind about 11 months because the Department of Treasury argued with service providers over who owned equipment, so we couldn't get Great Grant out the door. We couldn't get CAB out until Great Grant went out. Well, by the time we launched CAB, most counties had already invested their money for CAB in other ARPA-eligible projects. Steve Garrison, County Manager, Rutherford County, my favorite poster child for this, he held up a sheet and he said, Jeff, I've got $82 million. He turned it around in ARPA-eligible projects. Broadband's not on here. So in the first round of CAB that we finished out in June 30th, we only had 34 counties participate. So I got good news as to why every county gets to participate in this next round of CAB. But those are the dollars that we have. So I think I just talked about that. That was a great slide, by the way. This is another great slide. These are the great projects that we funded. And I'm going to now come, I think, if this works well, the dashboard, so it shows what we've done in Durham County. And all this is available on our internet site if you look up NC Broadband, and you'll go to North Carolina our .gov address. So this is Durham County. So what our GIS folks have done is they've gone, and you'll see this in a moment, they've looked at every single address in Durham County, and you'll see this little legend on the right. So if you go to the left on that legend, you see where colors become more red. And this represents the proportional count of addresses. They're called broadband serviceable locations. That's a federal term, so it's got to be something big and long and fancy. We call them BSLs. I call them addresses. Those are eligible addresses within that six-sided figure called a hex bin. To the right, the bluer it gets, is the higher percentage of addresses in that hex bin that are unserved or underserved. So the purpler it is, the greater the need in that area. So if we zoom in a little bit, now you start to see individual addresses. The green dots represent addresses that are served or will be served through the Great Grant. Addresses that are not in color-coded, those blocks are considered to be fully served. You'll see the red dots, and the red dots represent addresses that are eligible for funding. The little blue dots are covered by another federal program. They're not eligible for funding through the Broadband Infrastructure Office. When I zoom in on a hex bin, I actually can click on that hex bin and I get this little information. This one says, look, there are 11 addresses there, and there are 4 addresses that are eligible for funding. Yes, ma'am.
This is so fascinating. This is so fascinating, and I really, especially the way that you are using GIS and data, and that it is literally down to the household level. Can you explain how does this happen where you have these very separate addresses that do not, what is going on that these households do not have access?
I can give you my opinion.
Okay.
When I won grants, these scored grants often had certain parameters that you met in order to maximize your score. And the best example is Roanoke Electric was my client back when the first Great Grants came out. So they were announced. The maximum grant amount was $2 million. Curtis Wynn, CEO, we met, and he said, this is wonderful. We're going to get $2 million in each of 4 counties that we were bidding for. And I said, yes, sir. I said, we could apply for that, or we could win them, and we'll get about $500,000. So the reason why is, and if I look at this, it might be better to go back one. If you will look and you'll see, for example, in the far right-hand corner, you'll see a little constellation of about 6 or 7 or 8 red dots on the eastern side, and then you'll see some green dots around it. So when I'm building infrastructure where those green dots are, I'm coming in at a cost per location that meets or exceeds the highest scoring criteria. But if I went down that little road and I picked up those additional 4 or 5 locations, that messed my cost up. And that made it to where because I know I can score my own application. All of a sudden my application is out of spec and I'm not going to maximize, so I leave those folks off. So consequently, people call us, yeah, I see the fiber, my neighbor up on the front of this road, they got access, why don't I? Or they call somebody and say, yeah, we'll come down your road, it'll cost you $25,000, and we'll give you a credit for $8,000, but you still got it. And I'm on Social Security, I can't afford that. We get a lot of those calls. And that's why many times you will see that, because that cost would skew what was necessary in order for somebody to score highest to be able to win the grant. Hopefully, because the CAB program is not scored, it's going to make a difference. Yes, ma'am.
No, you took it right. I'm happy she asked that. So, because the algorithm that you gave to Commissioner Carter early on was like, this is cost efficient for 4 to 6 houses at $80,000 of X. And then we get to a point where, let's just say in the mountains, there's only 2 or 3 houses every mile. It is no longer cost efficient, which is why we see underserved. And so these 2 grants put together, when we think about middle mile, last mile, CAB in some way might potentially be able to help us, since it's absent the scoring, fill in that gap.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I got other questions that are general. I'm waiting to the end, but yeah, okay, so no, that's helpful.
So we talked about that. Here are the programs, and again, it was based on the total amount of ARPA funding received by a county. 61 counties in North Carolina received more than $8 million in ARPA funding. Consequently, the county match, in my opinion, was out of whack with the needs, because counties that received more than $8 million in ARPA funding were required to contribute a minimum of 35% of the cost of a project. So some counties said, okay, we'll do that. So Wake County, for example, committed about $6.7 million, Buncombe County about $4.4, Beaufort County about $3.5, Pitt County close to $4 million. Other counties, for example, Johnston County had $41 million in ARPA funding. Over $39 million was dedicated to water, sewer, and other ARPA-eligible infrastructure improvements. Those were extremely important investments, and their commissioner said this is what we need to do. There were very few counties that got more than $8 million in ARPA funding that actually participated in our programs, because it just didn't make sense, especially with the significant delays that took place in terms of that dispute between Treasury and providers and yada yada. If you receive between 4 to 8 million, all of a sudden county commitment was only 10%. Less than 4 million, county commitment was only 5%. Those represent huge projects. So I'll talk about the changes from that disparity perspective here in just a moment.
Quick question,
Yes,
though.
ma'am.
Even with them kind of, prorate is a bad example, even with them taking it down and saying your cost share is less, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it still only like 25 or 35 counties that can even meet that threshold? Like statewide, like or let's just say more than 50 counties that can't even meet that 5% or the 15%?
If you think about Terrell County.
Yes.
And I always screw it up. But other counties like that, isn't going to happen.
That's my point. So
Yes,
this is where I was going to wait to the end. And again, you can say it's your opinion. I don't want you to get in trouble with Secretary Weaver, Mr. Brooks. But my understanding, there are leftover dollars in DIT. If this initiative is so important, what is keeping the General Assembly, and this was my one big hammer question, I know, I, as a county commissioner, do not have a problem sitting here and voting that my county paid a 35% if we got it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And if the mission is to, I am not going to be upset nor penalize the state, the governor's office, or the General Assembly for saying, all right, Durham, you can pay 35. Terrell can't even pay 0. We're no longer going to hold them to 5 or 10%. We're going to cover 100% of theirs. But Durham, you still got to pay your 35. And are we having an issue with larger counties saying, well, wait a minute, if I still got to pay my 35 and they don't, I just want to publicly say, I'm okay with us having to pay our I-35 so that the mission to get everybody their stuff is met. Is that where the log jam is right now?
It was. I've got good news for you.
Say your lesson. You better preach today, Mr. Brooks. What is it? I've been out of town.
It's a good thing I'm not standing up because I would be moving all around. So anyway, I'd be right there with you. This is really a great slide, which isn't worth reading, except to talk about the process. So in the process, in 2023, I did an RFP. It should have been called an RFQ. And this really came back from these federal programs because counties were being asked to put match money in. It's a lot of money. I thought due diligence should be more significant than it was. So we talked to 69 service providers about our RFQ process. 43 applied, 41 made it through. Those 41 were awarded a convenience contract. They're allowed to bid on CAB, broadband pole replacement, and stopgap projects. The others are not. It was interesting after we made those decisions, those awards, I started getting phone calls from everybody else. Well, how do we get in? You don't. Yeah, but I'm a lawyer representing. You don't. You qualified or you didn't. In this process, we gave them a form. I wanted to do it online, but we hadn't quite advanced that far. So in this form, we asked very specific questions, very detailed questions from a financial, operational, and technical perspective, and we were looking at capability, capacity, and competence. So we waved these folks through. We then came back to counties and we said, are you in or are you out? Counties had the option to contribute their funds from dollars out of their local general fund, ARPA SLFRF dollars or ARPA revenue replacement dollars. That's where we initiated the CAB process, CAB 1.0. We put together a standardized scope of work, and the valuation was called best value, and it started with evaluating responses on financial, and it walked down through the operational. We looked at rate plans, including their support for eligible low-income household rate plans so people could afford it. And the very last thing we looked at was technical capability, competence, capacity, and then the number of addresses and the cost. That was the bottom. So unlike the scored programs where that was at the top, this was turned upside down. We put the scope of work up. The first 10 days, providers would look at every eligible address in the county. They would dispute those addresses where they could prove that they provided service that met the criteria. And then from that point on, they had 30 days to respond to the proposal. All 41 bidders in a county were eligible to submit proposals. Obviously, not all 41 are going to do it. It's usually entities that have facilities within the county or maybe adjacent to the county. Came back in. We looked to make sure we had everything that we needed. And then it was myself, there's only one of me, so I was on 20 of the 34 evaluation teams, another person on the broadband office team, the county manager, and one other county employee that were part of the evaluation team. Can't be an elected official, can't be an outside employee or outside contractor or whoever, had to be a county employee. Everything that we got in that response, the county got. So you got a copy of the scope of work, you got a copy of the proposal, the cost structure, all the maps, all the details. We did financial analysis because way back in the day I was a CPA and I kind of thought that was important. But we also had a third-party accounting firm, KPMG, did financial analysis. You got all the maps. We had our internal work where we could say, hey, we got proposals, they overlapped in this many locations, here's a map of where they overlapped, and we sat down and we met about it, and the county was front row. Literally the way it worked is we had these evaluation criteria, strengths, weaknesses, comments, and I would lead off and I'd say, I'm going to tell you about financial statements, and we'd talk about it, and then the county would talk about it. We'd get to the very next item, we'd say, okay, Mr. or Ms. County, you lead off, because I want to hear what you have to say about this. And from that point on, the county led the way, and we bring our comments up after the fact. Now, it's a DIT decision because it's a procurement, but as I committed over and over, we will make no decision without the active engagement and input of the counties. And that's true for 98 counties in this state. There are 2 that could care less, just saying, but it is what it is. We lie to their citizens when we respond. Oh yeah, your county's actively engaged. They really aren't, but we don't want to roll over anybody. Now, I should say actually one less than that because Orange County made a decision to do their own thing. I can't do anything for Orange County except respond to their residents. So we would come to a consensus. If we didn't get it in that first meeting, we'd come for a second meeting, we'd come to a consensus. It'd go through our team, we'd sign off on it, go to procurement, they'd sign off on it, call the provider, you want it? Yes, we do. Call the county manager back, you still want him? Yes, we do. We're off to the races. So that's how CAB worked. At the end of, or I won't say at the end, I was going to say probably May, we started asking the General Assembly, give us some relief from the county match. We'd like for you to waive the county match requirement. We also said, hey, by the way, counties that put in money in this CAB 1.0, we'd like to give them their money back so they could do something else with it. Both houses said this is really good, but it didn't get anywhere, got appended to the budget bill. The budget bill didn't go anywhere. It's not going to go anywhere until after the elections when the General Assembly comes back into sessions. So, having said that, here's the results of that. That's a great slide. This is what's fun. My boss, I want to give her the credit, said, well, you know what? You've got that $86 million in that gym bag in the trunk of your car. What if I went and I took $500,000 out of that, wrapped it up in a rubber band, put a Post-it note and put Durham County match on it and put it in the CAB bag? What that would mean is, now it's not huge, but any little bit helps. What it means is I could get a maximum project in Durham County for $1.42 million to expand broadband. We'd want your participation, just like any other CAB, but at least it's some money. It is some money. Now, that's a maximum project, but there's no county funding that's required. None. We're all about timing. We have, between these funds and the upcoming BEAD funds I'll talk about briefly, we have, this is going to sound weird, we have plenty of money. It's timing. Our programs require 24-month build-out. The RDOF program is a 6-year build-out. Reconnect programs are 4 to 5 years build-out. With our programs, like with the CAB program, if we do it this year, we get a project in and out the door, your citizens that are impacted by this are online no later than 12/31 of 2026. With stopgap, which kind of does a little bit of fill in the blank, it'd be the end of 2027. With BEAD funding, it'd be 2028, 2029, 2030. We don't know. So this is why I think this is a great opportunity. You as a county can put in additional funding, but we're not asking for that because we'll get it in the door with this $1.42 million. So what we've done is, and Claudia, you're aware of this, we've sent you the forms. We need you to fill in the form, say, yep, we're all in. Put 0 where it said we're going to put more money in. Put 0 in where it says we're going to put ARPA funding in, so local money ARPA funding. Because why would you? Again, this is my opinion. You're getting 65 cents on the dollar. There's more money coming where you're not going to have a county match, I do not believe. So why not take advantage of this funding today? Again, it's a down payment. You can report back to your citizens that you're actively engaged. There's more money on the way, and it simply represents this continuum of funding. So this is an example. If you put $500,000 in, I've actually got the $500,000 with the rubber band around, so we got that covered. I'll match that with my CAB fund for $500,000. Your provider will put in $421,000. This is for a maximum project. The project could be less, but these are the dollars we have, and this is what it looks like. I was really proud of that slide. I really like the way that graphic came out. So there's a document to fill out. Now, if you thought you wanted to put some money in, you can do that. That would be something where you would have to vote and authorize that. If you had any inkling you wanted to do that, write a note on the bottom of the form and just say, hey, we may put some more money in, we may not. Just be aware. We'll let you know. We can amend this before we put your scope of work up. It's not required. You can make the decision whether you think that this requires a board resolution or not. Most counties tell us they don't think it does, but again, that's your call. So you sign the form, you send it in. You also tell us the 2 people on your evaluation team, you send it in. September the 9th is the magic date. We need it in by midnight that day.
And we are taking these steps, Manager Hagan, making sure, because that's less than 7 days.
Absolutely. We've been following Mr. Brooks' advice quite intently.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So I just want to mention the Office of Digital Equity and Literacy because this is so important. So the Odell team, we just finished the Digital Champions Grant Program, and I'm familiar with this because in my side job, I thought we ought to be able to keep up with stuff. So I put Salesforce in. And in Salesforce, we track all this stuff, and the Odell team uses an application that sits on Salesforce to track all this stuff. So I know exactly who does what, when, where, and so forth. And in fact, I thought, I am so sorry. I thought I will send you, I thought I had a slide in here that talked about every organization that mentioned Durham County that applied for a Digital Champions Grant. We know it. I will send it to you. Because many times I'll do this presentation to boards and they'll say, well, I've never heard of these folks. And I can make arrangements to make sure that you guys are introduced to them because it's important to know what these entities are doing in the county. There's another round of grants that are coming up this fall from the Odell team. When the BEAD program comes around, there's going to be almost $200 million in North Carolina to support digital equity and literacy. I just think that's important, so I want to make sure that you know that. So we have BEAD, and I've got a title up there because I never remember what it stands for. We're getting $1.57 billion in funding in the state. It was about $1 billion, and the GIS folks got busy, told the FCC, you missed a bunch of addresses, added them in, and that increased it about $500 million. I mean, just a mess. I can't even think about that much money. So the difference between CAB and BEAD, I think, is a little more nuanced here. The legislature originally said we're going to use GREAT, CAB, and stopgap to utilize BEAD funding. GREAT is 100% incompatible with the federal legislation. Stopgap isn't applicable. It's going to be something like CAB. The difference, I think, based on my work with federal programs in the past, is that the NTIA, which is the federal agency sort of administering BEAD in concert with our office, is going to be a little more specific about how BEAD gets used. So service providers are thinking, oh, RDOF was really difficult. Reconnect was really hard. It was just so much going on. I went to a meeting over in Nashville about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it was almost like the NTIA in every meeting was sort of persuading service providers it will be worth their while to participate. So I think it's going to happen here. Our legislature has to do some things, and service providers have to sign on. If it's like most federal programs, service providers will contribute up to 25% of the cost of the project. We'll pay the rest. The counties will not have any requirement for funding. This is what I anticipate based on doing federal work in the past. Here is the BEAD stuff, and in your presentation you'll have links to that. There are two parts to BEAD. From the infrastructure side, the first part's been approved by NTIA. The second part, we're negotiating back and forth to kind of smooth over some things because we have perspectives that are different because we've had a broadband office that's been actively working in the grant environment. A lot of states have not, so they haven't caught up to us. So we're in this final review. Emily Ganji on our team is the queen of BEAD, and I'm glad it's her. Wouldn't want that job because she's the one that really interfaces with the federal government on this. Here's a handy-dandy timeline that kind of shows you where we are. We'll start getting money in the state the end of next year, end of 2025, maybe the first part of 2026. We have to spend all the CAB money before we get the BEAD money in. But when you think about $1.3 billion, you think about a cost per location today across the state is about $6,000. So you guys brought up the number of unserved locations. When you start to get these remote locations and they're a mile down the road, or they're in the mountainous areas where sometimes there's no electric infrastructure in the air, we have to go through rock to get conduit there. Now you're going to be looking at $25,000, $35,000, $45,000 a location. But I believe we'll get to 99.9% technically of all these locations.
Actually going to be a question I had is, at the end of this timeline, we'll be serving everyone?
I think just about everyone.
Amazing.
Now, a couple things to think. I think I'm coming up with. So let me hit a couple things to be aware of. First and foremost is it costs between 5 and 15% a year to maintain fiber infrastructure. So literally somewhere between $5 10, 12 years, a service provider is rebuilding that infrastructure, and we don't subsidize that. We don't pay for that. The other thing to be aware of is if you think about an ARPU, which is average revenue per user for fiber services, generally about $60 to $70 a month. But think about $60 a month. That's $720 a year, I think. The service provider pays $5 to $10 a month to buy the internet to provide to that end user. They pay $5 to $10 a month to provide 24/7 customer support. For every 12 users, they're going to buy equipment, CPE, customer premise equipment, to support that end user. It might be $300 to $400 a month for that equipment. You got the proportional cost of the service tech, their salary, and the van, or whatever vehicle they use. So their costs are involved, plus the maintenance of the infrastructure. So there's significant costs, and when you get to only 1 or 2 subscribers per mile, that's where we're having these serious talks with service providers, because we don't want you to go in and just build it. We want to make sure that you maintain it, because once that individual has access, we want them to keep it. Now, I don't know if legislation is required in the future. I can't tell you, but this is not the days of what they call POTS, plain old telephone service, where there was a public mandate, and both the Public Utilities Commission and the FCC were involved in policing this. Broadband is not regulated. We have, in the broadband office, we have no statutory regulatory authority. The Public Service Commission does not. The FCC does not. So it has to make sense for a service provider to deliver service there. Now, I had in one county meeting, I had somebody lecture me and said, well, we don't know, what do you think about using public funds to build broadband? These funds are going to these for-profit organizations. And I replied to him, I said, I didn't make the laws. We did the same thing with rural electrification. We did the same thing with water. We did the same thing with sewer. Congress passed the law. General Assembly passed the law. I got the money. I won't say in my trunk anymore in deference to you, but I've got this money. My job is to help you bring the money to benefit the citizens in your county. And that's where we're at today. So that's my commentary. Thank you so much for your time. I've been patient. I went longer than I thought. I apologize. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. I feel
Yes,
like
ma'am.
folks have jumped in and asked questions. We'll start on this side if there's more questions. No? Commissioner Carter?
Yes, really such an educational presentation for me. Thank you for
Yes,
this. Could we go to the slide, the one, the CAB 2 opportunity for Durham County, and wouldn't require any funding unless we wanted to add additional funding in order to maximize the project. What might be an example of a situation like that for Durham County? Where might we want to add? You mentioned that would be an option in order to, looking at your footnote, maximize the project.
So what will happen is when the proposals come back, you have the option of prioritizing locations. It's my recommendation that you do not, because there's no legal requirement that a bidder has to bid the proposed locations. I use a very facetious example, however. Let's say in the north part of the county, there were 50 locations that you prioritized, and let's just say it was $100,000 per location. So bidder number 1 comes in, they said, oh, 50, 100,000, that's what they want, let's bid that. Now, granted, it's out of scope for the dollars I propose, but I'm just giving you an example. Bidder number 2 comes in and says, oh, that's 100,000, that's really expensive. We can serve 500 locations in the rest of the county for the same amount of money. I'm looking at your county manager. If you're sitting in the meeting, I'm looking at both of you and saying, what do you want? What is the best value for the county, 50 or 500? So we advise counties not to prioritize locations. What most providers will do that already invest in the county that will bid, and these are going to be realistic bids, they're going to say, these are opportunities to expand our network cost effectively in the county. It's 100% of the cost is covered. If you put more money in, then you're getting 65 cents on the dollar. So since we're already putting that amount of money in, you can say, okay, well, I might be getting 80, 85, 90 cents on the dollar if you had more money to put in. Is that a value to you for those residents when you're going to be getting 100% of it with stopgap and with BEAD funding. Now, again, it's timing. But the county's not going to have to put, to my knowledge, the way it looks today, county puts no more money in for either the stopgap program, which is designed to pick up those little locations that aren't otherwise served, or the BEAD funding. So if you committed money now, are you really getting a big bang for your buck?
Okay.
My perspective is you probably are not.
I see. Okay. And earlier, did you mention on one of these slides something about a policy group that's part of either your office or
Yes, ma'am.
in some way part of this infrastructure?
Emily Ganji is Director of Policy, and she's the one that's really chartered with developing our BEAD response. And she's really carrying the interaction with the National Telecommunications Infrastructure Association, which is a part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. She is point going back and forth with those to refine our BEAD document. It has to get approved by Department of Commerce before they're willing to release the funds to us.
Okay.
So most states are in that boat. There are some states that have BEAD funding going out the door right now. They didn't have the investment with ARPA funding that we did for our Great Grant CAB and Stopgap programs. So they didn't have anything. They now have BEAD funding. They're doing their thing. I think the best word is we're better at what we do than they are, and we have more money. We're getting this money out the door and then planning for how best to use BEAD.
And we should thank Joe and Kamala for this BEAD funding that's going to be coming our way?
Yes. But I think the official word is, and this was an opposite type of thing where, you come out and use the word bipartisan. That didn't satisfy the county commissioner in a certain county that I won't name, but just at the end of the day, Congress voted it. At the end of the day, the General Assembly voted it, and there we are.
Good job. Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'll come to here. Commissioner Jacobs?
Yes, fantastic presentation, and thank you
ma'am.
so much for the important work that you're leading, and the passion that you have for this is very obvious.
Thank you, ma'am.
And your expertise as well. Yeah, and I'm really glad that you made the point. We have, as a government, subsidized many, many different things in this country. We've subsidized oil and gas. We've subsidized lots and lots of things. This is not unusual this is the way we do things in this country. Yeah, I'm really interested also hearing from our interim county manager, who is also our deputy county manager, who's overseeing our ARPA funding and also our IT. And because what I'm hearing is this is free money, but we're on a race of time. And so, and at the same time, we're still getting emails from residents saying we don't have internet access, or we have really slow. So I really just want to know, what is our next steps? What do we need to do?
Great. And Greg Marrow is also on the line remotely, and he will join in as well. As I've shared before, we've really tried to be wise in how we've allocated our dollars as it relates to broadband. As you may recall, at first we had allocated about $10 million of our funds in broadband, and taking sort of watching the pace and how the dollars flow from the Fed and state, as well as listening to our advisors, our partners in it, we reduced that number significantly so that we could repurpose those dollars for other pressing needs. We, as you know, have two recipients of the Great Grant Award with Loomis and Frontier with 1,700 locations or homes that will receive broadband. And we will share a little bit more about that at the other meeting. And Greg can chime in as well, but they are on schedule to meet the targets. And I cannot say enough how much I'm grateful the state is facilitating that and holding the internet service providers accountable with all the targets that are required. For this particular one, and the goal is for us to submit the application and basically point out all eligible areas we want to put into the pool as a part of the application. And with that process, we'll seek the CAP funding, and we'll move that step along quickly. These dollars have the same sort of deadline with all ARPA dollars of the end of the year, but with the step that Mr. Brooks shared, there's that September 9th deadline for a component of it. But we would then work with the state office to facilitate that next step, which is to say we would like to be a part of the CAP grant. They would then facilitate that step with seeking and coordinating with an ISP provider to see who could provide the services. And am I saying that correctly? And so it almost feels a little strange that someone else is facilitating, but I cannot say enough, because as you may recall, probably about when I first got here 10 years ago, we sought out other entities. We looked at what was happening with some of the co-ops that were mentioned earlier, couldn't get anyone. And so to have someone else do this facilitation is tremendous for the community. So we're on a path. And Greg Marrow is quite involved. John Kiefer as well. He's also been tracking all the different funding types as well. And we know down the line with the BEAD grant, that is a huge opportunity if there are areas that are not met with these dollars. But we are trying to optimize the ARPA dollars and reserve our funds as much as possible and use other people's money.
Great. Well, it's good to hear that you all are on it. And related to digital equity, I know Emily, even locally, Emily Ganji has been involved with Digital Durham. There's going to be you probably know, a conference at NCCU on digital equity coming up very soon. And we are partnering with the city of Durham on using funds focused, ARPA dollars focused on digital equity access. So
it's very important. And when you sit with somebody and you say, you can do this, it's like, oh. And I remember doing I did some work. One of my clients was Lumber River Council of Government. And I remember going to little bitty hamlets down there, no puns since hamlets down there, but little bitty places. And you sit with people and say, let me show you this, and let's talk about how it can benefit your life. And eyes would do like that, and it's complicated. No, ma'am, no, sir, it's not. There's a certain way to do it that protects your information, but it's extraordinarily valuable.
Right. Now we're talking about the security issues. And I'm glad you brought up maintenance, because now with, during COVID, there was a one-to-one access for Chromebooks for students in Durham Public Schools, and they are now failing. And so now we have a problem even with replacing the access that we did have, so.
Let's not talk about those Chromebooks right now. There's other issues there. Vice Chair Burns.
Right. I just want to do, really quick, one, thank you for this really informative presentation. Thank you for working with our staff to help us maximize our dollars. Thank you for just the comparison that you made in the beginning about the diabetes, and folks just being able to access it so that this information can get to this and people can get help. I think that speaks to a broader array of services that DIT is offering that people don't think about. I know I'm going to say it wrong. I think you all have a health information exchange authority that you all have under DIT. And for those who don't know, they do a Black maternal health initiative, and they use the information that they get via broadband, via the internet, to be able to track in like 40 different counties low birth weight with Black maternal health. So this broadband conversation is really going to be a huge determinant for health outcomes for some really, really small counties. So thank you for all that. I'm gonna get you in trouble again. You don't have to answer it because I know we're at time, but I might want to get you in trouble again. I think this is I think it's really interesting. Like, I concur with my colleague in the beginning when we were talking about how you have these local utilities, local cooperatives, and I'm trying not to say any particular names, who have taken advantage of these utility lines, whether they be telecommunications lines or whether they be electrical lines, and being really creative about how to get broadband to folks. Up here, where we don't have as many cooperatives and you do have larger utility companies, whether it be electric or whether it be one with telecom, isn't there kind of a rub on whether or not they should be allowed to do this? Because if it is working in these counties, as you pointed out, like in Brunswick, wouldn't it be advantageous for it to work here? And I guess my question is, why are we seeing some of that rub from a policy perspective of allowing major utility companies to utilize these lines? And we don't even have to think about it for Durham. Let's think about it for the mountains, where you pointed out blasting through rock is just insanely expensive, and maybe carrying it across the utility where it's exposed to weather is problematic, but might be cheaper and might be a way to get this to folks, and that could include people in our county.
So there federally regulated utilities such as Duke,
right,
Dominion, SCANA, TVA.
I was trying not to say nobody's name, but okay, go ahead.
Because that's all I can think of. They're publicly held, are required to offer pole space to broadband providers. And there is a charge that they're allowed, called a pole attachment fee, that they're allowed to charge, and that's scrutinized by the federal government. We're not involved in that at all. Cooperatives, it's generally a separate type of relationship that they have, and again, that's not legislated in North Carolina or federally. When you think about a pole, on a utility pole, an electric utility pole, the top part of the pole is called the electric space. Only certified electricians can go into that space and work. Most co-ops will put fiber in that space called ADSS. It's non-conductive. I don't know what it is, stands for something, but it's self-supporting, so if it falls down, it won't cause an issue with the electric. They'll use that for their own purposes in terms of moving data around the system. And it really comes back to, if you think about Piedmont, for example, or Roanoke, or Halifax, or Wake EMC, whenever they go and buy their power, I'll make this really quick so I don't bore you guys. Whenever they go and buy their power, they commit to a certain price for that power. So I'll pretend like it's gasoline. They'll say, you know what, we're going to buy so much gasoline at $5 a gallon. So no matter what, we're paying $5 a gallon. We're going to commit to buying some more gasoline, a certain amount, at $8 a gallon. If we don't buy all of it, we still have to pay for it. And then we're going to guess at how much more we're going to need. So like this past summer where it was so hot, they may pay $20 a gallon for that gasoline because they're buying it ad hoc. They're not under contract for it. If I'm a power company, I can put more and more devices downstream from the substation, between my substation and the home that I'm serving, the meter, to help control the cost of that power. So if I can sit there and control the voltage going into the meter, that's going to save me a little money. If I can get inside the house, kind of like Duke does, and I can maybe turn the air conditioner off, if I can, maybe buy power back from their Tesla being charged middle of the night at a lower rate, if I can control their water heater, it saves me money, and consequently, it's worth my while to make that investment in fiber communications. We did that at Roanoke Electric. They have about 10,000 residential meters. It's a very poor area. And they calculated they could save enough money that they would not pass those costs on to their end users, to their member owners, if we ran fiber to every home. The payback would be about 19 years, but it would be worth it. So those companies are interested. Now, Piedmont, they were also one of my clients. We built their network, and what Piedmont said is, anybody can buy our fiber. We're welcome to sell them excess fiber capacity to expand broadband. Our member owners, our board does not want us to be in the broadband business, so we're going to make that decision. So AT&T comes along, or Frontier, or Lumos, or Brightlink Century Speed, I'm not sure what their name is this week, but whatever it might be, they're not going to buy fiber from Piedmont. They're going to put their own fiber on that pole. So what happens with all of this is when they're going on the pole, they'll go out and they'll do an assessment, and they'll say, we think that these poles are not big enough, or they're too old, or they can't handle the sway of the dish weight of fiber. They need to be replaced. And as I said, about 2 poles every mile have to be replaced. They'll negotiate it. AT&T has to pay Piedmont to do all that work. It's called make-ready work. And only when that work is done, then can they begin to put the fiber on the pole. But again, they negotiate the rate for that pole replacement work, and they also negotiate the annual fee they pay to have their lines on those poles. That's kind of how some of that works. Now, if they already own the poles, then there are places in the state, I'm in the middle of this with some providers where CenturyLink actually owns poles because they had telephone lines, and they don't want another provider to go on their poles. And I can't make them, or our lawyers can't make them, let this other provider. So the provider has to go across the road and go on the power poles, which may not be as attractive from a cost perspective because there may be more make-ready work that has to be done. So consequently, they're able to use less of our grant funding to actually deliver service to an end user and more of our funding to pay to get on the poles to serve a few users. Does that make sense?
No, that was, I know that was exactly what I wanted to hear, because I've heard that conversation at General Assembly, and then that was, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
That's helpful.
Thank you so much. I had one last question for myself. Is there a way, I know that there's probably differences in technology that's used in the fiber wiring, but like just thinking of my own neighborhood, like I've seen, I think Google came and laid down their fiber, and now we have Frontier coming and tearing up everyone's yard. Is there a way to incentivize and work with these companies of work together and lay down fiber once and like split or share the cost some way and just use the same infrastructure?
It would be good if there was like a dig once, and DOT is actually working with, when they're rebuilding I-95, to put down common conduit that can be used. For whatever reason, it seems like that companies don't want to share conduit when they're going in the ground. Now, obviously, when they're on poles, if providers are on poles, they have to be 40 inches below the electric space, and then they can be every 12 inches. So a lot of times, if you ride around and you look up at poles and you see big, thick cables, it might be Google and Frontier and AT&T or whoever else. But in the ground, they did the same thing in my neighborhood, where they came and they dug it up. And because it's an overbuild, those folks are not getting any funding because your neighborhood is already served. So they're doing it on their own dime. So they evidently think that they can recover those costs on their own because of the density. There's so many customers. And when I used to do the work on the other side and I do financial work, I'd say, well, it seemed to be that if you got 30 to 35% of the customer base and you were the second provider in, it probably made sense financially. You were going to be at cash flow break even. But if you couldn't get to that 30, 35%, it probably was not a good decision to overbuild. So usually you might see like the phone company and the cable company in a neighborhood, and then you'll see Google come in. You might see a third party come in. But Google, I think in some cases made a decision that they're going to overbuild certain places where they think that the revenue per user is going to go up, and on the cash flow perspective, it will make sense. You probably won't see a fourth provider go in the ground in your neighborhood, though, for another 5 years. Okay. Did that answer your question?
It does, I think.
It's not the answer you want to hear.
It answers my question. I think maybe my question is more to the providers then of why don't you guys work together?
Yeah. I mean, why doesn't somebody fund conduit large enough?
Yeah.
Because you're going to have the conduit, and then you have smaller conduit. Inside that conduit, you have smaller conduit that has, because generally it's 12 glass fibers in the sheath, and then you're going to bundle those sheaths together in like 24, 48, 96, 144. And then you have these multiple conduits. Well, if you're in there once, now the flip side of that is there's a thing that's commonly called backhoe fade. So if you dig it up, you're digging everybody's up at one time. Mm-hmm. And now you're into service delivery issues related to resiliency. If you don't have an alternative route to reroute traffic, you're just down. I mean, the same thing can happen when a tree takes it down in aerial land, but you can see that, and it's faster to repair than if it's dug up. So.
And I think I understand that like perspective in like these dense communities and neighborhoods, but when we're looking into more rural areas, I feel like for the companies, it would make more sense for them to be more collaborative with each other of laying down this wiring, because they're not going to have as many customers as they would in a dense area. but
In Person County, we did they were a client, we did a project, and Person County built 53 miles of fiber and offered it up to virtually every provider. Hey, use our fiber, you don't have to build backbone or middle mile. And they got 0 takers. You know, I mean, it was an option that was available, and nope.
Wow.
I can't speak to that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this very informative presentation.
Thank you, and just thank you to Claudia and also to Greg, wherever you are. These guys have been so generous with their time, and I just thank you for allowing me to come. I took way more time. I'm sorry. So it's a drive-through at McDonald's on my way to Troy, North Carolina. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And next we will have our presentation from Equitable Wellbeing with Dr. Brent Lewis and Chief of Staff Shannon Trapp. I put Chief of Trapp, combining your name. And we have 30 minutes for this presentation to try to reel us back into time. About, do you think 15 minutes presentation or 20 minutes presentation, 10 minutes questions?
I believe we can do that. Good morning, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Commissioners, our acting manager, and Attorney Massey. We are here for the first time as a team of the Office of Equitable Wellbeing to do a presentation to you all about the work of this team. Dr. Lewis joined us as Director of Equitable Wellbeing end of May 23, beginning of June 24, and was given the task of establishing this inaugural office, and within 6 months had added the manager of Equitable Wellbeing, Cassandra Kiger, equity and inclusion analyst, Joanna Gallman-Young, and our racial equity analyst, Robert Espinosa. And so the 4 members of the Office of Equitable Wellbeing team, which sits as a division of the county manager's office. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Lewis.
Thank you, Chief of Staff Trapp, and is it still morning? Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. We're excited for our first presentation to the board, and I will not belabor the time because I know we are between you and lunch. So Chief of Staff Trapp has introduced our team, and so I will start with our mission. So the team, once we were established, got together and had a 2-day retreat. And one of the things that we felt was most important to spend time on was what was our mission, our goals, our vision, our values as a team, and what would drive the work that we would do for Durham County. So we found through a lot of white pages and a lot of whiteboards and a lot of markers that our mission was supporting a diverse local government to achieve consistent and equitable experiences. And that is what we feel guides all of the practices, the programs, the initiatives that we have been putting together over the course of the last year. Chief of Staff Trapp talked about the timeline of how long I've been here. However, my staff has not been here that long. So the things that we will talk about, some of that has only been about 4 months, 5 months, 6 months that we've been working on some of these initiatives. Equitable Wellbeing's values, creating belonging, engaging inclusively, empowering diversity, living authentically, ensuring equitable outcomes, and building equitable operations and policies. Again, during that 2-day retreat, we spent time writing things, scratching it out, writing things, rewriting it, and really talking about who we are personally, what we brought to this work, our past experiences, how we saw Durham County, how we saw our office, and the needs of both internal and external. This was my first position in government, so I had to really think deeply about what are our values in local government and what does equity work look like in local government. Some of my staff have worked in state and federal government, but each of us was taking a first step into the local government space. So really thinking critically about how did we see the values that each of us brought, the county manager's office, the team at large, and the county. So starting with our mission, moving into our values, built our strategies and framework for how we do the work of equitable well-being. So training and development was the first thing that I identified as a gap for the county and wanted to address in the work that we did. And I think the first training that I done pretty early in my time was the partnership with the LGBTQ Center of Durham. And that was something that we began to really enhance once Cassandra came on board, was our training and development arm of the department, which you'll see as we continue this presentation. We've also worked really hard to enhance our cultural heritage programs, our awareness, and our resolutions that we've come before the board with. We will also talk about data governance, an area that we would like to build across the county, our racial equity action plan that we'd like to build, our language access program, equity consults with county departments, and employee resource groups. We've also added office hours and consultations with county departments. So once I got here, I was like, whoa, there are a lot of departments. How will I meet all of these people? So one thing that I started to do when I was in office of one was meet with other directors. That was a way to learn about what their offices were doing and how I could be a part of that. So in that, I realized we needed to do consultations with other departments to really engage with what their work was and how we engaged with their work. Because oftentimes, equity work can seem very siloed, and people can see us as a you're over here type of work, which we are embedded across the county. So we have now split out to each of us having 7 departments that we work with as consultants. And so we've kind of gone in and started engaging with departments, whether it's with directors or individuals in departments that have been designated maybe by their director to engage with us for trainings, for guidance, to answer questions, and provide equity tools. We also provide weekly office hours every Wednesday from 2 to 4, where anybody from any department can come to our floor on 4M in Admin 1. We have snacks, we have coffee, we tell people come drop by, we tell the security downstairs, let people up, or we go down and get people. And it's just an open space for people to come and chat with us about what their experience is, what questions they have about our work, what ideas they have about our work, because we realize the 4 of us don't know everything about the county or about departments or about ways folks want to engage. So it's really just a drop in, let's engage together. We are also working very closely with our colleagues in the Office of Strategy and Performance as they have just finished working very hard on the strategic plan. We will be working very closely with them as they work with departments on business plans to think about how do we infuse equity into our business plans so that, again, that's another way that we are institutionalizing and operationalizing the work of equity across the county and not in a siloed way.
Thank you so much for taking this time to learn about our department today. Again, I'm Cassandra Kiger, manager under Dr. Brent Lewis. And so under our training and development, we have started building out a program to ensure that everyone within Durham County is able to have consistent language, is able to talk about the same things. We find so often that when DEIB work happens, much of the confusion, much of the frustration starts that we're not talking about the same things. So our office has now taken over in the onboarding process. We do some initial training and now doing training across different departments on what we call our DEIB 101. And so as of March, we had over 320 staff trained, and we've continued to grow that. And this is really giving common language across departments, being able to help folks understand how they can take their job and whether or not equity and inclusion is written into their job description, how it's still part of their responsibilities. We also have partnered alongside the Diversity Movement, which is a local organization to help bring in sort of what we call our 201, which is called Diversity Beyond the Checkbox. And this is through our learning management system in partnership with HR, so that folks can begin to learn more, for those who don't already know about it, about unconscious bias, about how to include equity and inclusion in things like their business plans, and how it impacts the day-to-day work of our job in local government. And we are building and will be launching in February alongside HR to have a full comprehensive plan. So every individual at Durham County has the option and has the choice to become sort of kind of a departmental office local expert in their DEIB work. And so they'll have opportunities to go through an approximately 15-hour and then can gain an additional 10-hour trainings in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and how it's specific to their department and their goals. This initial training, we've been working really hard from the start to gain really good feedback. You see here some of our qualitative feedback, being able just to learn and support our colleagues and be able to understand from their perspective how they are learning and hearing about this work, and how they're interpreting the information we're giving them into having it impact their day-to-day jobs and their day-to-day responsibilities. We won't read all this to you. Lunch. Go ahead, Dr. Lewis.
The Government Alliance on Race and Equity, or GARE, is an organization that we are a member jurisdiction of, and we have actively been recruiting for our internal GARE team, which Robert Espinosa serves as the liaison for, which we are still recruiting to ensure that all of our internal departments have representation there. As I mentioned, we are working to have a new racial equity plan. We've been collaborating really closely with other jurisdictions to learn what they're doing with their racial equity work. I have been very intentional since I started to meet with my colleagues across the local areas, so I meet very regularly with my colleague at the City of Durham, but I also reach across to Wake County and other jurisdictions to learn about what are they doing. I attend the GARE conferences and other local meetings, both virtually and in person, building our toolkit so that we know what's happening both at the local and national level, and how we can implement some of those strategies, processes, and frameworks here at Durham County. One of those examples is looking at things like budget equity and policy review from an equity lens. So those are some of the strategies that we're looking in year one at. How do we build those strategies? How are those things working at other jurisdictions, and how do those things apply here?
Doc, real quick question. The Government Alliance on Race and Equity, so there are different counties and municipalities that take part. Quick, just off the top of your head, if you don't have it, it's fine. Do we know out of the 500 some towns in North Carolina, how many of them still have active GAREs or GAREs that are still operating? And have we seen a decline since this new attack on DEI, post-COVID? Like, is there 100 and now there's 78?
I wouldn't know how many of them still have their internal groups active, but I would say most of my colleagues are still active members. Like, they're still paying their membership fees to be an active member of GARE, and I see most of my colleagues, at least in the local, at the GARE meetings. Okay. Right? They're still attending. And most of us will go in November to St. Louis to the national meeting, because it'll be right after the election. Most of us will be going for guidance, right, if there's anything changing. Mm-hmm. This is your
As we've
slide.
talked about, we also engage in Heritage Cultural Month. So this is just in an effort to help. We never expect that every employee knows everything. But one of the goals is to invite people on a regular basis to learn something new, to engage in a new way. And so we host 22 heritage and cultural celebrations throughout the year, and those involve a variety of things from highlighting key aspects of that activity, that event, that celebration. We engage in trainings, learnings, activities together, and also highlight really important partnerships and activities that are happening in the community. So far, we're about halfway through that Heritage and Cultural Year, and we've had over 250 staff participate in active engagements alongside us. Again, we engage really hard in making sure we receive feedback from that. We continue to learn and grow within those. That is also the program through which we're now producing more of our BOCC resolutions and being able to share that publicly and make sure that the community knows that this is something that Durham County employees are focusing on and helping to highlight and erase new issues that maybe our DECO staff haven't had the resources to think about or consider before. Some of the feedback from this, again, I know you have everything, and I don't want to read to you, but just making sure we highlight some of the ways we had individuals who attended Pride training with us through the LGBTQ Center of Durham. And not only did we receive feedback that individuals learned about the training, understood how it applied to themselves as DECO staff. But for example, we had someone who said, you know what, I'm a father and I have a child who's a member of the LGBTQ community. I don't quite know what to do with that. And yet at work today, I was able to come, learn about how to engage with her, learn about how to be a part of her member. And now I can see that in both a professional perspective as well as a personal perspective. For the first time at DECO, we highlighted Jewish American Heritage Month right alongside Arab American Heritage Month, as that seemed really critical, especially this year, to highlight just the huge juxtapositions of a community that all lives next to each other and how that can be both complicated and beautiful. And we actually received a lot of positive feedback from those and being able to say, yeah, we're grateful that we're leaning into things rather than ignoring things, and had DECO employees highlight how important that felt to them, especially in this year. Another activity we're working on a lot is data. So we have now built a group of over 25 employees who have self-selected to participate in saying, we want to make sure we understand data, we know how to use it in our day-to-day jobs, but also that we're collaborating. Instead of having 19 different departments with 19 different ways we understand and read and collect data, how can we do this together? And so how can we share data and make better collective decisions? And so we are working as a part of that group. Actually, tomorrow we have a data analyst joining our team, as well as the Office of Strategy and Performance, to be able to support us and help lead us in that. And we are working with that group and across the county to develop some data norms and some basic data literacy, so that we know it is so easy. It's a part of the water we swim in to have bias, to have life experience impact our decisions, which can be really great and also can be leading. And so we want to complement that with data and be able to include that when we are making decisions. And so we're really excited to partner alongside the Office of Strategy and Performance to work with this data team to help those business plans and help mirror how we say we have a diverse group of people making decisions, we have a lot of data behind those decisions, and when we put those together, we make the best decisions and have the best innovation possible.
And as a new office, one of the things we want to always do is make data-informed decisions. And so one of our short-term goals with data is to partner with Human Resources on an employee engagement survey. One of our long-term goals is to do a comprehensive climate survey for the county, which would include more equity-centered questions in our resident survey for the city and county. I serve as the liaison for the Racial Equity Commission for Durham, and one of the questions or feedback I get sometimes from community and from residents is more engagement around surveys and community engagement around data. So I think that would be a really good way to engage that community piece.
Another thing that we're really excited to have started at Durham County is employee resource groups. So we have officially 2 employee resource groups that have launched. It is Women in Public Safety and Early Career Professionals in Government. So Joanna Gallman-Young and I have both experience in employee resource groups and in creating and leading those. And we have worked for over 6 months with local and national experts to create a foundational program that we will be able to grow. We now have a small budget that we work with within our office to support these groups, and we are excited to say that this month we have our first employee resource group activities. So the Early Career Professionals in Government are hosting their first event in a few weeks on September 11th. We have at the beginning of October, an open house where we're hoping to highlight our first 5 ERGs within DECO. And again, the goal of these ERGs is to create a grassroots way for individuals to engage with their coworkers who may not necessarily be in their same department. A lot of the goals coming from Dr. Sowell and the county manager's office involve the fact that we're pretty siloed, or there have been concerns that we work in silos throughout our departments, and so this is one way to have individuals from different departments be able to engage together on similar issues, on similar goals, but also to meet like-minded individuals who either identify in a certain way or want to support those who identify in a certain way. So by October, we should have at least 5 leadership teams up and running, so that includes the 2 that are going, as well as an LGBTQ focus group, a Hispanic Latinx focus group, and a disability focused group. And we are very excited to be able to launch those, and we'll be able to present data, both qualitative and quantitative, to the executive leadership team, and we're hopeful the board come the new year. Another program that we're very excited to officially be able to be starting and launching is language access here at Durham County. We have nearly 20% of our Durham County residents that don't speak English as a first language. Upwards of 15% report that they don't speak enough English to be able to use our county services well, and so we want to recognize that simply. And we have been working closely with the city-county office on refugees and immigrants with under NIO, and also with the language access coordinator over at the city to be able to understand how we could support our Durham residents better. And so we have built and presented to Dr. Sowell a comprehensive multi-year plan and how to identify different ways that we could expand our language access programming, and we are very excited to say that with that presentation to Dr. Sowell, she has approved an interim position for us to be able to expand in our department that we're working with HR to post and hire for now, to have a full-time language access coordinator come into Durham County who will work directly in our office. I will partner directly with them to be able to build a language access plan for the entire county so that we can have a comprehensive goal and it matches and partners well with the city so that residents don't have to figure out 2 different programs but can understand how to work with all of our local government offices in a similar way. And then we have I am working with John Kiefer, our grants manager, to make sure we have a variety of funding options as we work on growing the number of multilingual employees at Durham County, as well as finding out how we can improve and support language access as a whole throughout Durham County, not only for our local government, but for all of our agencies. So being able to partner with local organizations that have similar issues, finding interpreters, translators, etc., and being able to foster those programs and those services within the county.
What questions do you have for us? Thank you for your time.
Thank you all so much for all the work that you put in. This is a lot of work in 1 year. Yes. Thank you for that. I had obviously the last slide. Yeah. It's very exciting for me, but just had a couple of questions on that one to start us off. What is the thought behind like having a separate city and county language access coordinator instead of making that a joint venture, that it's like we've done with NIO, of having a joint city-county position?
That's a great question. I think some of it comes from funding options. Some of it also comes from the ability of contracts, right? The way the city does contracts and the way the county does contracts. I don't have a ton of information on it other than it's different and it's complicated to switch funding between the two. And so to have individual departments be able to pay for their language access, I think because of how the contract and funding is set up, it's a different process for each of them. So to have
But
one.
like the coordinator position itself, that person could be joined.
Yeah, I'll just add that because this is new for us, this language access coordinator position is not an FTE approved by you all. It is a provisional position that we'll start with. And one of the things that this person will be able to do is explore what those options are and how we move forward. So it's a provisional position that's just for 1 year while we figure out the positioning of language access and where ultimately it lies and how it's done. So of course we serve at the pleasure of the board, and what that decision will be, we'll look for them to give us some data and some information after they've gotten on board and can kind of give us a better idea about our language access in the county.
And I always love more language access positions and like refugee and immigrant services, but just wondering of also the efficiency of, since we have the joint venture with the City for Refugee and Immigrants, that's a possibility here. And I know, is this also going to tie in? I know our Director of Public Information, Deborah, has been handling the translation services for meetings. So is this person going to also assist with that? I know we've only done it like ad hoc if someone requests it, but trying to find ways to make it more accessible.
So that would be a partnership, but the other thing is that the accessibility of language access is so large, right? And so we're translating minutes for meetings, but also, for example, the actual meetings, there's no interpretation at the actual meetings.
Yeah.
So that coordinator could be working to ensure that we have that piece. For example, whether it's ASL that's needed at the meeting in person, or whether it's Spanish interpretation that's needed on site in the actual meeting, making sure those contracts and those vendors are in place for in-person meetings, because I think the more you put that out, the more residents that need services will actually come to the meetings to engage.
And to clarify, this position isn't an interpreter or translator.
Yeah.
This is a coordinator to ensure that we have those services everywhere needed in the county.
Great.
And I would just add that we have some of our departments who already have very strong language access programs, especially under ACM peers. Our public health and social services departments have strong. This this language access coordinator will help with all those other departments that don't necessarily know where to go. And so they will collaborate with PIO and others who need some support, or who may not have large enough teams that they can manage it on their own.
Are there any questions from the board? Commissioner Howerton?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Great report. Appreciate it, all of it. I just have a question for Dr. Lewis about the racial equity. How does the racial equity piece play into this? Or is it folded into it? Or do you want to share a little bit about how that's working?
Sure. So the racial equity work is folded into all of our work. So like, for example, the GARE team is really leading the racial equity initiatives that our office is doing, and Robert is really leading the charge there. And so the GARE work, racial equity is centered in their work. And then because I am the liaison to the commission, I'm bringing back all of the work that the commission is doing from the community back in. So we're holistically looking at race and centering that, but our work is so broad, right, as a team, but we are always centering race in the work that we're doing on a daily basis because of our connection to GARE.
It's great to hear. The connection is so broad across all governments. with the National Association of Counties. We had the seminars there at our conference a couple of years ago, but it's kind of quietened down in the last couple of years as to the DEI and all the conversations around that. So I just say thank you for the work that all of you are doing around this, because it's very important work. And hopefully we'll be able to raise this conversation even more after this election. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes, I also want to thank you all. I even want to say your names out loud, because it's really difficult for me personally to remember names. But Dr. Lewis, thank you. Joanna Goldman-Young, you're our equity and inclusion analyst. It's great to see you and know you're working with us. Robert Espinosa, I think I chatted with you one time on the hall. Thank you so much. And Cassandra Kiger, it was really great hearing from you all today. And I really have a greater appreciation for the breadth of what you're doing. All of your strategies and your framework around training and development for county staff, the cultural heritage, and the awareness, the resolutions you're bringing forward. The data governance, I'd like to learn more about that. I thought that sounded really complicated. Not exactly sure what's going on there, but I could tell we need to be doing it. Brenda highlighted the racial equity action and the work that you're doing with GARE. And while we're broadening our sort of view of diversity and equity, we really want to be sure we're keeping that central. And so it's great to hear how you're doing that. Language access, so important. And the way that you're working across the county, and then these employee resource groups. It looks like a really solid approach, and it's great to learn about it today. One thing that I've wondered about as something that we should be thinking about with every policy decision is what's the impact on racial equity, and also what's the environmental impact of every policy decision we make. And I know that the Environmental Affairs Board is bringing forward to us a framework that could be incorporated on our action agenda forms, and in the same way that we have a fiscal, impact of a certain policy. Are you all thinking of, maybe you're nodding like, yes, you're going to bring us something?
We are.
Good, okay.
You're thinking 2 steps ahead of us, Commissioner Carter, so we are thinking of that. So GARE has a checklist on racial equity, and essentially it provides questions and framework for decision makers. Some of it is around budget, some of it is around policy, some of it is around decisions that you make. Essentially it's for race, but also the most vulnerable in which you are making decisions for. So I will create a checklist, if you will, for you all as decision makers as you think about the work that you do. And it's really centered around racial equity.
Great. You'll be bringing that forward. We'll look forward to that. That'll be helpful. I mean, I know this board tries to keep that central, but that would be an explicit practice, that we could actually enact to be sure we are doing that as much as possible. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Quick question. Well, one, congratulations on everything. I think Google reminded me that it was about a year ago last month that we did our first you coordinated. No, not a resolution. We had a training class. It was a year ago, I think, it's September now, so a year ago, August, where, all y'all was all y'all and how we should, use language, and people came out of it feeling better. So congratulations, because I know that was your first foray into bringing folks in, and it seems like folks have been open to it and not as apprehensive, so kudos to that one. I do want to go, because I think many times, I entered the world the way I entered the world. I entered as a woman. I entered as a black woman, a dark-skinned black woman, a plus-size black woman. There are all these other layers to not just being black and female. And so there's some things sometimes, but I'm thinking of those areas. So what are some things that we might not be thinking about? Until I had to push my dad and my sister in a wheelchair, I did not think about how heavy doors were. I did not think about how far away handicap spaces were. I did not think about calling the airport or anything saying, okay, we need a wheelchair to get us from here to here because O'Hare or whatever is so big, right? I think even what the Commissioner Alameda, we did a tour with the sheriff, you know, they were actively recruiting as hard as they could to get a woman on the bomb squad team. They got a woman, the uniform didn't fit. Same thing for NASA. They actively trained this woman and then she could not go. What are some things? And I know that for some people that sounds really niche, but if we are really trying to walk down this mission statement that you all have crafted, and if you don't have the answers today, that's fine. I know you all are saying you can't think of everything. Just what are things? Last one, I can think of a guy, he worked at the office with me. Every car we had was a Honda Civic to drive. He could not fit in like a Honda Civic, a Tahoe was. So what are things that we're not thinking of? And also, what ways are we making it comfortable for people to come to you all about those things? Because people often suffer in silence. So those are kind of my two questions.
Those are great questions. And literally, I don't remember what day it was, but we talked about this in the office. Our team had a collective, we were just brain dumping in the office about this topic. And we were like, how do we do it? And I think you had a really good response of like, you have to have them at the table. I'll let you give that answer.
So one of the reasons we are working on this sort of 101 and getting it across the county is that we know a lot of people who work at Durham County, and it's a testament to Durham County that we have a lot of diversity and a lot of different voices at the table. And yet, when we do this, we engage in an intersectionality activity. And we start with the intersectionality that we actually keep track of at Durham, which, you know, constitutes gender, race, age, and that's about how far we go. And we pay attention to that. And then when we engage in this activity, when we get done, I just was with the DSS departments on child safety and CPS. At the end of it, I said, raise your hand out of the 20-some people here who are diverse and well-educated and have masters in social work, who put the name of your passport on your list of identities? And we had one person raise their hand. I said, who put the language you speak? I said, who put the fact down that you can walk through this door? Right? And so we looked around the room and we said, and this is why you have to have diversity and inclusion before you get to equity and belonging. This is why there's 4 of them. This is why we learn about all of them, and this is why we can't stop learning about all of them. It's because when you sit in a room, you only have the knowledge and information that's in that room. And one of the key things we have to do together is practice thinking and engaging in a way and or creating tools and policies in such a way that makes us recognize who's not in the room and what things we're not thinking about because they're not there. So exactly to your point, Commissioner Burns, when we're sitting in a room and no one there has a mobility issue, do we at least have tools and resources? Do we have the checkpoints? Do we have the policy review points to say, wait, none of us have a mobility issue, but that still matters? There must be a reason there's 25 of us in this room and no one has a mobility issue. Why is that? And so our job isn't to say we're able to think of all of them. Our job is to equip our teammates in whether they're in the deeds office, whether they're in a variety of things, to engage in that thinking. One of the activities we have coming up is in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month, we're engaging in a language access simulation, similar if you've engaged in the reentry simulations. And so we've taken like 8 different scenarios throughout the county and matched them exactly to in this case, we're doing an English-Spanish scenario, but if someone was a Spanish speaker, what is it like for them to get a passport application filled out, to get their prescription filled, to go into the police department, to do these different things? And it is simply to say, it's fair that not everyone speaks multiple languages or has lived in a place where they've had to do something not in their first language. And also it's fair that we think about it, and that when we don't have that experience, we create it in such a way that gives us empathy and learning. And so that's our role, exactly to your point, Commissioner Burns, that is our job, is to say when we notice that there's not something or a community member brings to our attention that there isn't something in place, that we create a way to think about it on a regular basis.
Thank you. Commissioner Jacobs?
Thank you all so much. And as my fellow board members have said, I'm also really blown away with all of the work that you have achieved in a very short time, and the thoughtfulness that you're bringing to this, how deliberate you all are being. I mean, approaching this from really every single angle. And it's really an immense task, because you are looking at what's happening internally, within Durham County government, externally, in our entire society, and then also in terms of the services that we're providing directly to people, so our staff, but also the community, and then for us around decision-making, ultimately, policy. So, yeah, it's really, really important. And I think it's going to help us all do our work better. And, ultimately, Durham County government is about people. I'm trying not to get choked up. My daughter got married this weekend, and I had a family member come up to me and say, and it was a magical wedding with her wife Sarah, and I had a family member come up and say, "This is amazing. You've managed to have a queer wedding where you've got trans people and Republicans dancing together and celebrating."
Your alcohol budget was high.
And and honestly, that is what it's about. It's about love and respect, understanding, compassion, and celebrating diversity, but also the humanity that everybody has in common. And how do we achieve that and promote that as an organization? So thank you.
Thank you all so much. We appreciate all the work that you guys do, and can't wait to see all of it come to fruition and your next presentation with updates.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to take a quick 10-minute break for everyone to do a working lunch. We will bring food back to our tables, and then get moving forward with the Go Durham Access presentation. And I want to say, please stick to the 10 minutes so that we can be on track, because we are way over time. 1:11. Yes.